Nausea, like I talked about, that usually kicks in by week 5 to 6, and then it stays with us, the majority of us at least, until that first trimester. Now, some moms have none at all, and that's wonderful. Other moms are going to have it at different times during the day, off and on. Some are actually going to vomit, some are not going to vomit. A lot of people are going to be done with the first trimester, and then they move on to feeling better, and then other moms are going to have it the entire time. There is a wide range of what can be normal, and so don't freak out if you don't have nausea. It doesn't mean that you're not pregnant or the baby's not really there, anything like that. And don't freak out if you do have nausea. It doesn't mean it's going to get worse or stay forever, and all of the in between. Okay. So just know that having nausea or not having nausea is a totally normal part of those first 6 weeks.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started.
All right, today we're going to be tackling all of those, maybe not all of them, but a good amount of those questions or things that we're curious about during the very first 6 weeks of pregnancy. Now, a lot of times this is those very early signs that we're like wondering, is this it? Am I pregnant? Why do I feel this way? We're going to dive into some of that today. Now, I don't know about you, but I remember with my first pregnancy and honestly my second and third and every single time we were trying, but I was Googling things and trying to figure out, am I pregnant? Could this mean I'm pregnant? You know, like we had sex 3 days ago. What are the signs that, things could be happening and maybe there's implantation and all of this. And it was like it was my full-time job. That was my curiosity. And even after I had gotten pregnant before and we were on baby 2 and 3, I was like, okay, is this it? Is this it? And I always had this thing, and this might sound totally silly, but I'm sure everybody's got their kind of thing where they're like, I knew I was pregnant when, right? And one of mine before the pregnancy test would actually show positive. And this might sound extremely silly, and it's fine. But I would look at myself in the mirror and I would look into my eyes, and I felt like my pupils would dilate just a touch. And I just felt different. Like I would look at myself and I'd be like, you either yes, like you have another soul inside of this body, or nothing. And that might sound silly, but every one of my pregnancies, I did experience that. And then I would take the test and it would be positive. Or sometimes, I think like with my first, I remember looking at myself and stuff, but I tested positive and then I really felt like I noticed it. With my third, for sure, it was before I took the pregnancy test and I was like, oh my gosh, you are pregnant. And then the funny part about it is it wasn't until, and this is with all of my pregnancies, it wasn't until I actually took the pregnancy test, got a positive, that all of it, like it would kick my nausea in like immediately. I was like, if I didn't know, like actually know and be able to look at this test and know that I was pregnant, would I have nausea? Because it didn't exist until it popped positive. So anyways, I just think that is super interesting. And you guys probably have your own set of like, this smelled funny, or I was really attracted or really unattracted to my husband, or, we all have our little things, breast tenderness and swelling, or, the nausea or whatever that tells us like, yes, you're pregnant, or no, you're not. But in those early weeks, oh my gosh, it's like the time drags so slow, and all you want to do is know, is this it? Am I actually pregnant? And then on top of that, as you are moving through that period and say that you do discover that you're pregnant, then it's all the questions that come with it. So it's like all these questions of, am I pregnant? And then it's like is this normal? Am I pregnant, and is this normal? And I see this as a doula or childbirth educator a lot as well. Those first 6 weeks really feel like they can kind of even be part of the the loneliest part of the whole journey where you're just kind of in it by yourself. Maybe you've chosen to say something, maybe you haven't, you're communicating with your birth partner, obviously, but there's a lot of questions and you feel that shifting, but you haven't really seen your provider yet. And it's kind of this strange in between with a lot of big questions and not a lot of answers. So if you're feeling anxious and you feel like you don't have all the answers and you have lots of questions, I don't want you to worry too much about that. I want you to know that it's totally normal, that you're right where you're supposed to be. And the likelihood is that things are going to progress just as they should. And if not, there will be some markers that tell you that things are a little off or so, and you and your provider can deal with that during that time. Now, the other thing that's kind of tricky is trying to figure out when you're going to meet with that provider once you do have a positive test. Different providers want to meet at different times. Most of them want to meet with you between 10 to 14 weeks, and that's within that range of that 11 to 14 weeks where we say if you're going to have an ultrasound used for dating or to decide when that baby is quote unquote due, like dating how far along you are, that during that 11 to 14 weeks is going to be the most accurate. Now, ultrasounds are one of those things that have become super, super common. It's, every mom has them now, but this definitely is a creation of modern age and of this generation, and even the last couple of decades. So even back when my mom was having babies, it wasn't like you were getting an ultrasound every single time. So back in the 80s, in case you're wondering, you weren't getting an ultrasound all of the time. Prior to that too, right? Ultrasounds, they were really trying to use them for if there's bigger pregnancy problems, then we need to get a look inside. Now we're we need to see every baby. But the truth of the matter is, most of the time, babies grow just fine. And even if there are things that we catch on ultrasound, most of them aren't something that need to be dealt with or worried about during pregnancy. It's something that here's a little tick of a box to pay attention to postpartum. And so that comes with its own set of worries and just different things that we have to work through during pregnancy that may or may not be a benefit to us at the time. So whether or not you choose to do ultrasounds and how many of them and how often and at what times is totally up to you. I'm just letting you know that this is typically the time when they want to set your first appointment and set up your first ultrasound so that they can date that baby. So I'm going to encourage all of you, when you are getting ready to be pregnant and have more babies, keep track of your cycles. Keep track of, if you can, when you ovulate, because that is going to be way more beneficial to you than any of this other stuff, particularly if you have consistent cycles. If you are a mom with inconsistent cycles, that is something to pay attention to and maybe work with your provider on to make sure that the dating is correct. But otherwise, if you know when you get pregnant, right? Because you know when your periods are and you know when you ovulate and you know when you have intercourse, then you have a really close date range that you can deal with and make decisions off of for your body and your baby and your pregnancy that is going to be better than anything else that you can do, including the ultrasound. The ultrasound's going to get close, and that's very helpful. But if you have actual dates, that's better information. If you're consistent, you're I have periods that are every, 28 to 32 days, and I consistently ovulate from day 16 to 19, and we had sex on, it gives you a really clear picture of where you should be. So, me and all those induction conversations and stuff that are coming. Take note right now if you're already pregnant, which a lot of you are, and that's totally fine. For next time, those are things to keep track of, because then when you go for these appointments, you can choose to have or not have the ultrasound, and you can choose to go off of that date or use your information. And so that could make a difference, especially as you're getting closer to having your baby later in pregnancy. But without getting into too much information, because I'm kind of jumping the gun and I'm really just trying to talk about the introduction to the episode in this moment. The point is, if you're feeling kind of anxious, you have lots of questions, I want to be able to bridge those gaps. I want to talk about what's really normal in the first 6 weeks. I want to talk about what might be some red flags, what you need paying attention to, what you can kind of let go of, and what you can do to support your body and your baby right now. So with that, let's get started with today's episode. So what immediately happens is a lot of changes in your body. It is changing fast, and there's a lot of things that are happening that the outside world can't see. We can only see this on a very tiny microscopic level. There's hormones like progesterone and estrogen that are skyrocketing or doing what they do. Your blood volume is increasing. In fact, it doubles while you are pregnant. So think about that. Your baby is developing vital organs, even from a very, very tiny stage where you can't even see. And so we've got some things that are happening on the inside that we can't see. And then we've got some symptoms happening on the outside that give us little hints that things are happening inside. So some of those most common things are swollen and tender breasts. So that is your hormones surging, right? And some of you might experience this currently with your periods or other things like that. When hormones fluctuate, you can have that breast tenderness, that breast swelling, and that's not uncommon. And so once we're dealing with those pregnancy hormones, that's another common piece of that, which if you're a tinier woman like I am with a tinier chest, I'm like, yes, please, anytime. Let's get those hormones going, please. If I'm going to be pregnant, let's at least increase the top half, right? So if that's you too, then you're probably very excited about it. If you are bigger up top, maybe you're just not so excited about that. And I'm so sorry, but that can totally be it. Mild cramping can actually be a normal sign of pregnancy. It does not necessarily mean that anything is wrong. A lot of women can feel kind of that implantation happening. And so they get a little bit of cramping. And along with that, you can get some spotting too. And again, it like if you've heard of it, implantation spotting, that can be really normal too. So spotting is not immediately like, oh no, I'm miscarrying my baby or anything like that. It can actually be a very normal part of the process. Nausea, like I talked about, that usually kicks in by week 5 to 6, and then it stays with us, the majority of us at least, until that first trimester. Now, some moms have none at all, and that's wonderful. Other moms are going to have it, at different times during the day, off and on. Some are actually going to vomit, some are not going to vomit. A lot of people are going to be done with the first trimester, and then they'll move on to feeling better, and then other moms are going to have it the entire time. There is a wide range of what can be normal, and so don't freak out if you don't have nausea. It doesn't mean that you're not pregnant or the baby's not really there or anything like that. And don't freak out if you do have nausea. It doesn't mean it's going to get worse or stay forever, and all of the in between. Okay. So just know that having nausea or not having nausea is a totally normal part of those first 6 weeks. The other thing that you're going to notice is that increased urination. And we see this a lot with the first trimester, but that can be one of those like immediate things that happens even during the first 6 weeks. That increased need to pee, like feeling like you're in the bathroom all the time. And that has to do with the increase in blood because your kidneys are filtering that blood, that extra blood. So you want to make sure that you are drinking lots of water, eating adequate amounts of protein, and focusing on the good stuff and not giving your kidneys too much of the extra junk that it doesn't need in order to be able to process food and blood and all the things that it does as an organ. And just a reminder here, you can have absolutely none of these symptoms, still be pregnant, and everything is fine. So these are the most common ones. But again, as in everything that we talk about with pregnancy and birth, bell curve, right? There is an average, and a lot of women experience this, and then you'll have the people that have more of it or less of it, and that's normal too. So that's just a caution there. All right, let's talk about that spotting though, and what some of those red flags are. So like I said, implantation bleeding can be totally normal. Even spotting during those first 6 weeks and even a little after can be totally normal. So this is the one that I think sends a lot of moms into the spiral at like 2 a.m. when you can't sleep and you're thinking about the fact that you saw any kind of pink or red blood on underwear or the pad or whatever. And you're just like, shoot, like what is happening with my body and my baby? So the light spotting that I'm talking about, this is usually like a light pink or a brown, and it usually happens around kind of like ovulation time when you would typically ovulate, because that's when implantation would be happening, and it's very light. So if you're noticing that in just a couple of spots, it's very, very normal. What's not normal is that bright red or heavy red, that deeper red blood that is soaking a pad, or if you have any kind of clotting or severe cramping that goes along with that, that's when it's time to call the provider and head in. So if you're having like spotting, that's one thing. But if we're having the heavier bleeding, cramping, blood clots, then that is more serious. And that's when you would want to see your provider. All right, how about energy? This is another huge one. This was like, along with the nausea, came the extreme exhaustion. So if that sounds like you, if you are going through that right now, just remember, it is totally normal. You are growing an entire system. You're growing a baby. You're growing an organ, especially that first trimester nausea. Like you are literally within those first 6 weeks, you are building a placenta. You are growing an entire organ inside of your body that's going to feed and fuel your baby. So keep that in mind. Your body's going to need a lot of energy in order to do that work. So this can look like needing naps in the middle of the day. I remember when I was working, because with my first pregnancy, I worked all throughout that pregnancy until it was birth time. And I would take my 10-minute breaks in this back office where they had some extra office chairs just like sitting. And I would put the two office chairs together. Mind you, I'm tiny, but I would put the two office chairs together like right up to each other. And I would just lay down and I would fall asleep instantly for 10 minutes. I was like waiting for that break. I was so tired, could not keep my eyes open. End of the night, I mean, just exhausted. It can also feel like all of a sudden when you're moving or say that you walk up the stairs, it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm so tired and I'm out of breath. Like I just like my body is done. So that can be really normal. You can also go through where you have bursts of energy and then kind of a sudden crash, and that can be normal too. Things that can help that really have to do with your diet and sleeping as much as you can. So if you are able to focus on that protein, like I'm always talking about, that's going to stabilize your blood sugar. That's going to help give you the energy that you need. You're going to be burning the right amount of fuel. That is all the stuff that you need for those building blocks of life, yours and your baby. So make sure you're getting that. Hydration is also going to go along with that. If you are dehydrated, it makes you tired. It actually makes you crave things you shouldn't be eating, like sugar and stuff, which is, it fuels the cycle of we're not doing so hot right now. So focus on that protein and that water. The other thing you can do is some gentle movement. So think of like when you get up in the morning, maybe do some yoga stretches and some light breathing, kind of get yourself going, that circulation happening, take a walk around the block or something. All of that can help with a little bit of that energy. And that kind of brings us to the next question that we always hear about in the beginning, not always, but a lot of moms have this question. And that is, can I continue to exercise? So this is definitely like an our generation thing, right? My mom's generation was not like pump and iron at the gym, especially pregnant. They were like, take it easy, sit on the couch, and that's not us. We are very active. And so if that's you and you're wondering, is it safe to do exercise? The answer is yes, especially if it's something that you have done prior to pregnancy. You really don't have to worry about changing much of anything, just listening to your body as you go through the process. So one of the things that I mentioned is maybe your heart rate and exhaustion, even your breath can be a little bit different, especially as you've got all that extra blood volume and everything, all the changes that are happening. And so just make sure that you're listening to your body. Don't overdo it. Don't feel like you have to catch your breath for a long time after you're doing some kind of workout, and focus on the basics. Walking is one of the best things that anyone can do, whether you're pregnant or not. And you can do that at any time. You do not have to exercise before you're pregnant to be able to be walking. You can walk at any time. Walk for, decent amount of time during the day. And I always say, like, if you can get a 10 to 15 minute walk in the morning, 10 to 15 minutes at night, or you want to do a 30-minute walk, or you want to add more amount of time, those would be my bare minimums, then absolutely go do that. And as your belly grows, like I've said, you see these ladies with their weighted vests, and I totally wear one when I walk now. You don't have to do that. You have your own little weight that you get to grow and take with you and is helping you to be strong while you are walking. So definitely do that. The best things that we can do, that like high protein and moving our bodies starting early in pregnancy, as early as possible, that keeps us healthy and low risk. That reduces your risks of gestational diabetes and preeclampsia, which are not only dangerous to mom and baby, but they also take away the choices that could be yours for your pregnancy and birth. So think about that as you're getting started and growing your baby. A few things to keep in mind, especially if you're wanting to bring exercise into your pregnancy, stick with what you've already been doing. So that's number one. If you are somebody you've been doing CrossFit, or you cycle, or you're riding horses, or you're swimming, whatever your exercise looks like, you can totally bring that into pregnancy. As your belly grows and your balance differs, then you just want to be able to adjust for those things as needed. But if you've been doing it before, you can safely take it in. Even running, it might just need some modifications, and you want to be careful with your pelvic floor. And there's some things that we can do for making sure that your body and ligaments and all the movements that are happening is safe for your baby. There's some things we can do as you get going. But anything that you were doing prior, you can totally do during. Now, if you were like, I had every intention of exercising before pregnancy, or, I wish I was more active, but that's just not the way it is. However, I'm pregnant now and I do want to be doing some of those more active things. You still can. Any of the walking you can do anytime, right? You can do stairs, you can do incline, you can do any walking is wonderful. Swimming is another really good one because it's a good cardio, it's muscle, and it gives you, especially as you get bigger, during pregnancy, it gives you that release of the weight. You can feel kind of that like weightless feeling while you're in the water. And so that can be really good for you too. You can still lift weights, do yoga, all these other kinds of things. You just start small. Yes, you can still build muscle during pregnancy. In fact, you will be as you grow your baby and you're walking around and doing whatever. A lot of the things that we think about, I mean, you don't even have to necessarily lift weights, for example, especially as your body is growing and you've got that extra weight. It's like, put the weights down, do the squats, do the lunges, especially all the leg movements and stuff. You can do all of that unweighted. And then if you want to add weights for your arms or anything like that, you can totally do that too. I won't get into all of the exercise do's and don'ts or recommendations and all that stuff because I feel like that's an entire other episode. Things dealing with diastasis recti and can I be on my back and crunches and like that kind of stuff. But just know that moving your body is one of the best things you can do. And yes, you can start it at any time. The other thing to think about is kind of think of your core and pelvic floor. So walking, like I talked about, or the swimming or the stuff, that's going to be really gentle on that area. But also it's time to like focus and breathe into that area. So this is one of the reasons that I absolutely love like a gentle yoga. You can even look up prenatal yoga exercises on YouTube or something like that. But it focuses on the breath. It focuses on the diaphragm. If you can get your breath to not be in your chest and move it into your belly, that's what we do during labor. That is what you want to be able to focus on. If you can, when you're breathing in, realize that your pelvic floor pushes out. And then when you breathe out, your pelvic floor comes up and you're trying to connect your breath and your pelvic floor. Not only is that just good practice in general, but those are the muscles that you're going to use during labor. So think core and pelvic floor. The other thing I'm going to tell you to do that is safe for almost every mama, as I'm like sitting here, I'm like, wait, can I say that? Yes, it's safe for 99.9% of you mamas. If you have any kinds of injuries or if you had acid reflux or something like that, maybe don't do some of these exercises. But the 3 free exercises, and I'll link to the guide, those are my absolute favorite. They are good for every mom during every pregnancy. These are easy, simple exercises that are going to help your body be strong and loose in the right places, and help you focus that attention to the muscles and ligaments and strengthening of places that are going to help you have an easier, more comfortable birth. So they also focus on baby's positioning, literally, and they're so simple and they're so easy. And so that's why I stress them so hard. But they're pelvic tilts and squats. So you want like a deep squat, learning to hold a good, healthy, deep squat without straining your perineum and causing other issues. And then the forward leaning inversion. But the guide walks you through exactly how to do it, how often to do it, the why behind it. So get the guide and go do that right now. Every mom can do that unless you have, like if you have an overabundance of water, of an amniotic fluid later in pregnancy, or you have severe acid reflux, like don't do the forward leaning inversion. Or if you have like a broken wrist or, basically like literally every mom can do this. So go get those right now. The other thing is to watch the intensity. So if you are doing movement, pay attention to your heart rate, pay attention to how you're breathing. If you can't recover after a couple of seconds after doing an exercise, you probably overdid it. Now, if you have, these are like your red flags to look out for, right? If you have any heavy bleeding, if you have severe cramping or dizziness, or you're feeling contractions later in pregnancy, those aren't moments that you want to focus on pushing through. Those are things that like, hey, your body is probably saying you need to pause for some reason and you should pay attention to that. And it's going to be different for every mom. So you might have a friend that's getting up early morning and continuing her workout routine like you wouldn't even know she was pregnant. And you might be over here, same amount of weeks pregnant, same amount of activity. You guys work out together all the time and you're like on the floor dying. And you're like, if I try to do any exercise, I'm going to pass out and fall asleep, or my body's just so exhausted. I feel so weak. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you. It just means that you're needing that and your friend needs something else. So just be gentle with yourself, and do the simple things that you can do, and then make those modifications as needed. Okay, let's kind of shift gears and talk about questions that you might want to bring into that first appointment, or things that you're going to want to go over with your provider. And we talked about kind of taking care of your body and taking charge over your body and what you can do, kind of those active things that you can be doing right now. But I want to shift into taking charge of your care as well. So, because this is the next step. Like as soon as we find out we're pregnant and we want to be able to take care of this body and this baby, the next step is making sure that we're getting the care that we need. So let's talk about that. Now, it's easy to walk into that first appointment and feel like your provider is the one that's in charge. They're the one steering the ship, right? They're asking you all the questions and they're ordering whatever tests and labs and stuff, and they're laying out their preferences or rules. But remember that you are the consumer and this is your pregnancy. You get to choose what kind of pregnancy you want to have and who you want to share that space with. And so if you are noticing things that are a little bit off from the beginning, and that can be as simple as personality, then think about if this is the person that you want in that space at all times, because they will be guiding your care. You should be an active part of it, but they will be guiding your care throughout your pregnancy and into your labor space. So this first appointment is really about interviewing this provider and seeing how you feel about them. Okay. We want to think of it as like dating, and it's blind date because neither of you know each other. So it's okay to come out of that blind date and be like, no, that was not the one. Okay. So think about that and plan to meet with different providers throughout your pregnancy. I promise when you meet the right one, you will know. And you will be so glad that you took the time to do that. And in fact, one of the first conversations that you can have with your provider is about your due date, because one of the first questions they're going to ask you is, when was your last missed period, right? That's the date that they're going to go off of. But the funny thing is, even though we have all of these different instruments that tell us when this baby should be born or when these dates exist, different providers are going to do different things with that information. And so if you ask them like, hey, how do you calculate the due date? Is it based off of my last missed period? Is it based off of the upcoming ultrasound? How do you calculate that? Do you take into consideration things like how long my cycle is, when I ovulated? If I've been paying attention to like when we had sex and stuff, do you take any of that into account? Do you ever move due dates later in pregnancy? If we've already dealt with this and created a due date off of these things, do you ever move it later in pregnancy based off of fundal height or late-term ultrasounds? Those are the kinds of questions that you can ask your provider right away. And it's not just about how they answer them or like the answer to them. It's more about how they answer them. Sorry. So it's not just about the answer. It's about how they answer it. So if their answer is, yes, we do this, or no, we don't, but how they say it, right? That is going to make a difference. How do you feel like they're treating you? Do you feel like they're already on the defense? Do you feel like you're going to have to fight this person for it? Do they feel like there's any room for conversation for things like this? Or are they just like, it's my way or the highway, this is how we do it, and that's that? That's going to make a difference for some moms, right? The other thing that you can ask them about during that first appointment is, what kind of labs and tests can I expect and do you offer? So that can include anything from, urinary tests to genetic screening to gestational diabetes. Let me know all of the labs that are going to be coming up and what you do with that information. If the results come up positive on this or that, what does that mean for us? Can you talk me through what that would look like for us? And sometimes too, these providers, they don't take a lot of time in the appointments, and that's just a very common trait. Some do, most don't. And so oftentimes it can feel rushed, even if it's not necessarily the wrong answer, if that makes sense. So if they say, if you test positive for gestational diabetes, that's what you're talking about, and you say, so what would you do in that situation? And their answer is, why don't we wait until we're there? I know you have a lot of questions, but why don't we wait until some of these things come up to answer them? Some of that might not be them just ignoring you and not wanting to answer that. Some of that might have to do with time. And so you can ask that, is this because of the amount of time that we have now? These things are really important to me. Would you be open to me booking another appointment just so I can ask all of my questions so that we can get through those? That would be what I would do to make sure that that's why they were saying that, let's just wait on these. Sometimes it is dismissive. Like, gosh, I'm not going to argue with this lady because I know exactly what I'm going to do and I'm not going to deal with it right now. We'll deal with it when it's time. Or it's not worth having the conversation because we don't know if you're going to have gestational diabetes. You have to gauge kind of how that relationship goes back and forth. The next thing you can do, you do not have to at this first appointment. However, if you're really looking to see kind of their take on things, and if you can grab them for a couple of these important questions, and maybe you just say, I've had a friend or a sister, or, a woman that I know had this experience. And so this has been on my mind. I'm just curious, how do you handle inductions? Is this something that you find a lot of women need? How about first-time moms, second-time moms? And at what point do you start talking induction or scheduling inductions? And what happens if I'm not interested in that? Or how do we make sure that I and my baby are safe if I decide not to move forward with an induction? That will give you kind of an idea of, is this going to be a red flag? Is this something I want to deal with? Are we going to be on the same page? Is he going to be able to, or she be able to listen to me and the questions that I have? Those are the kinds of things that can come up in these first appointments. And keep in mind, I'm talking a lot about the hospital first appointments. I know some of you are home birth and with midwives and stuff out of the hospital. And so that might be a little bit different. You're not going to be asking things like induction and stuff like that. However, many moms that start off or that plan for home birth and out of hospital births still start off in the hospital. And so these are conversations that you get to have that might help you to make decisions. Maybe I do want to be with a midwife, somebody who treats it a little bit less medical, or, however that goes. So this, again, is just to help you figure out, are you guys a good match? Another thing to ask is, how do you support movement and nutrition and natural pain management? How do you feel about a birth plan? If we really want to get into all these like good questions, what's your C-section rate compared to the national average? And what's your C-section rate for a woman like me? Like, I'm healthy, I'm low risk, I'm a first-time mom. Tell me what your C-section rate is for these things. And if they're getting really defensive, that's a sign. You guys are in this together. I think providers should really be on your team. They are part of your support system. Neither you nor them is, better or higher than the other. You're hiring them because they have a special set of skills that if you need, that they're going to be able to help you with some things. But you guys should be working through your care together. And so these early conversations help the provider to know where you stand, and it helps you to know where they stand, so that you guys can have a good working relationship, and so that they understand this woman is going to advocate for herself, and she's going to have questions, and we're going to work together. Any good provider, any really good, solid provider is going to be so happy that you've already done some research, you understand the process, you know what you want. And it's like, great, if everything looks good, and if like my job as the provider is to keep you and your baby safe, like if you guys look safe, like have at it, I'm here to support you. That's what it should look and feel like. Now, if you are looking for a ready-to-go list of those questions that you want to bring with you for your providers, we have a couple. We have one for if you're meeting with an OB in the hospital, and we have one for if you're meeting with a midwife, hospital, or home birth. All of those are going to be within the show notes, and I'll actually shoot them out on email this week. So if you guys are already on the list, then you can just grab them there. But it makes things a little bit easier, because then you can like check the ones that you're like, okay, I care about this matters to me, or I already know that my provider does this because I've had a baby with them before or whatever. And you can go through the list and kind of like make it work for you. So we have a list of those provider questions no matter where you decide to give birth, and that'll help for the moms that are here. And I haven't gone over all those home birth questions or out of hospital questions for midwives in a birth center. We have a complete list for that too. All right. So we have talked about what is normal, what you can look for, what those red flags for, all for your body and your baby and all that stuff. And we've kind of helped you through that first appointment, how to work with your provider, how to build that supportive birth team from the beginning. So I'm really excited that you guys are here, because here's the truth. As a professional doula, as a childbirth educator, the women that have the most empowered and carefree and happy and joyful pregnancies and births are the ones that are doing what you are doing right now. And that is getting educated, getting informed, and putting that information to use. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to shoot me a DM at My Essential Birth on Instagram, or you can send me an email at hello@myessentialbirth. And I want you to tell me one question that you have Googled during pregnancy, particularly during those first 6 weeks. I think it'll be fun to kind of put some of that information together. And also it'll give me a chance to chat with you. So if I didn't touch on something here, or you have more questions, then I would love to connect with you there.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step, so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.